I didn't realize how clearly my family had ranked me until my mother said it out loud at dinner. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, like she was stating a fact everyone already knew. "Your sister's family always comes first," she said. "You're always last." My father nodded beside her, slow and certain, like this was basic math. My sister lifted her glass and smirked into her wine. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just said, "Good to know." Because something snapped in that moment. Not my heart, my loyalty. My name is Mia, and for most of my life, I learned my place without anyone ever sitting me down to explain it. There were no rules written on the fridge. No speeches about priorities. Just patterns. Quiet ones. The kind you don't recognize until they've already shaped you. I grew up in a house in Denver that looked completely normal from the outside. Trim lawn. Neutral paint. Family photos lining the hallway near the front door. But if you stood still long enough inside that house, you could feel it, the way attention moved. How it rushed toward one person. How it slowed and thinned before it ever reached me. My sister had a gravity I didn't. Conversations bent toward her. Plans were made around her schedule. When something went wrong, people rushed in. When something went right, they celebrated loudly. I learned early that my role was different. I was the one who didn't need much. The one who could handle it. The one everyone described as strong. They said it like it was a compliment. It felt more like a warning. I didn't grow up unloved. That's the complicated part. I was loved in theory. In reassurance. In phrases like "you'll be fine" and "you're so independent." Love that sounded generous but came with an unspoken condition. Don't ask for more. Don't take up space. Don't need us the way she does. I noticed it in small moments. Birthday mornings where my cake came from the grocery store on the way home, while hers was ordered weeks in advance. Family trips where my suitcase stayed in the closet because I was better off saving for school. Graduation days where I held jackets and took photos while everyone else stood in the frame. When I left for community college, no one cried. There wasn't even an airport goodbye, just a quick hug in the driveway and a reminder to call when I arrived. I paid my own way. Worked extra shifts. Learned how to stretch money and time because I had to. And every time I succeeded, it quietly reinforced the story my parents told themselves. See? She's fine. She doesn't need us. Years later, when I moved to Seattle for work, the pattern followed me. Phone calls stayed brief. Updates about my life were acknowledged, then redirected. "How's work?" "That's good." "Did you hear what your sister's dealing with right now?" I became fluent in listening. In supporting. In staying calm while my own life unfolded off to the side. By the time of that dinner, the one where my mother finally said the words out loud, I already knew where I stood. What shocked me wasn't the ranking. It was how comfortable they were saying it. As if it had always been obvious. As if I had agreed. And maybe, in some quiet way, I had. After that night, nothing changed on the surface. And that was the point. No apology. No follow-up call. No check-in. Life went on smoothly, uninterrupted, as if nothing significant had happened at all. But something inside me had shifted. And soon, they were going to feel it. After that dinner, nothing changed on the surface. And that was the strangest part. No one called to explain. No one checked in. No one asked if I was okay. My parents didn't reach out. My sister didn't apologize. Life continued exactly as it had before, as if the words spoken at that table had simply evaporated into the air. But they hadn't. The requests kept coming, subtle and familiar. A text from my mom asking if I could watch the kids just for a few hours. A casual comment about bills piling up, delivered lightly, like a weather update. My sister forwarding a message about a payment that had accidentally bounced, followed by a laughing emoji. No one asked directly. They never had to. The assumption was enough. I noticed how automatic my old responses had been. Of course. No problem. I'll figure it out. This time, I didn't answer right away. At first, it felt wrong, like breaking an invisible rule I'd been following my entire life. I'd see my phone light up and feel that familiar pull in my chest, the reflex to smooth things over before they escalated. Instead, I let the phone sit on the counter. I finished my coffee. I went to work. I lived my day. And nothing exploded. That realization unsettled me more than any argument ever had. The world didn't collapse because I didn't step in immediately. There were no emergencies. No disasters. Just silence. Later came a second message. Then a third, more pointed one. Are you okay? You've been quiet. I was quiet because I was paying attention. I started looking at my own life with a clarity I usually reserved for spreadsheets and deadlines. My finances. My schedule. My energy. And I realized how much of it had been quietly allocated to everyone else. Money that drifted out in small, regular amounts. Time I kept flexible just in case. Plans I never fully committed to because someone might need me. So I began separating things. Not dramatically. Not with announcements. Just practically. I moved money into accounts that were mine alone. I canceled shared access. I stopped covering small payments that had never been discussed, only expected. When my sister texted asking if I could spot her for now, I replied with a simple sentence. I can't. No explanation. No apology. The reaction was immediate. My mom called, her voice tight with concern that felt more like confusion. Is everything okay? You seem distant. I'm just busy, I said. She paused, waiting for the rest of the sentence. When it didn't come, she filled the space herself. You know your sister's under a lot of pressure right now. I did know. I had always known. What I was realizing was that knowing didn't make it my responsibility. That was the turning point. Not a fight. Not a dramatic declaration. Just the moment I understood that being the strong one had become a convenient excuse for everyone else to stop carrying their share. I didn't know then how quickly they would test that boundary. The call came on a weekday afternoon, right as I was finishing a meeting. I could hear it before anyone said a word, the edge in my mom's voice, tight and rushed, the sound of someone trying to stay calm while standing on unstable ground. We need to talk, she said. Can you come by this weekend? She didn't explain. She didn't have to. By then, I'd learned the language. When my family used urgency without details, it meant something had gone wrong. Something expensive. When I arrived in Denver, the house felt heavier than I remembered. The air was stale. The living room table was buried under stacks of envelopes and loose papers, bills, notices, printouts that looked official enough to be frightening. My sister sat rigid on the couch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. My dad avoided my gaze entirely. No one asked how I was. No one ever does in moments like that. My mom started talking fast. Words tumbling over each other. A business decision that didn't pan out. Payments delayed. Contracts signed with optimism and very little margin for error. She kept using the word temporary, like repeating it might make it true. I listened without interrupting, my hands folded neatly in my lap, the way I always had. Then came the pause. The collective inhale. The moment they all looked at me. "Well," my dad said finally, clearing his throat. "You're in a stable place. You don't have kids. You can handle this better than most." There it was. The expectation. The assumption. The role I'd been trained for my entire life. They didn't say the words outright. They didn't need to. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was shocked. Not because I didn't understand what they were asking. I understood perfectly. I'd been preparing for this moment my entire life. Instead, I asked a question. "What's the plan if I don't?" The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Not polite quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you say something that isn't supposed to exist. My mom's face tightened, like she'd been struck. My dad looked genuinely confused. My sister's head snapped up, fear flickering across her eyes before settling into something else. Panic. It was like I'd spoken in a language they didn't recognize. Not helping had never been part of the equation. "I need time," I said calmly. "To understand everything." They nodded too quickly. Grateful. Certain. They assumed time meant I was calculating how much I could give, not whether I would. That night, back in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not resentment. Clarity. The next morning, I made 2 appointments. One with my therapist. One with a legal advisor. If I was going to step into this mess, it wouldn't be as the family safety net. It would be on my terms. When I returned the following weekend, I didn't bring answers. I brought boundaries. The house looked the same, but the energy inside it was different, tighter, heavier. The kind of quiet that comes from people waiting to be rescued. The papers were still spread across the table, now neatly stacked into piles. Bills here. Contracts there. Chaos arranged to look manageable. My parents were already seated. My sister sat beside them. Her husband hovered near the doorway like he wasn't sure if he was allowed in the room where the damage had been assessed. No one smiled when I walked in. No one offered coffee. "We're really glad you came," my mom said, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her voice had that brittle softness I knew well, the tone she used when she needed something but didn't want to say it out loud. "Let's talk," I said, sitting down. My dad launched into the same explanation I'd already heard. The downturn. The delays. The bad timing. He spoke like a man presenting a case he'd rehearsed all week, hoping confidence might replace accountability. My sister nodded along, adding details about stress, the kids, how none of this was supposed to happen. Eventually, the words ran out. That's when my mom leaned forward. "We just need help getting through this part," she said. "Once things stabilize." "How much?" I asked. She blinked. My dad hesitated. My sister answered for them, naming a number carefully, as if the way she said it might make it sound smaller. "And after that?" I asked. My dad frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said evenly, What changes so this doesn't happen again? The question landed wrong. Mia, this isn't the time to interrogate us, my mom said, her voice tightening. I nodded slowly. Then it's not the time for me to write a check. The room shifted. My sister sat up straighter. We're family, she said. This isn't about plans. It's about helping. Helping who? I asked. She looked at me like the answer was obvious. Us. I glanced around the room. And who's helping me? No one spoke. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're in a different position, he said. You don't have the same responsibilities. You're single. You're stable. You can afford to step in. There it was again. The math that always ended with me paying the cost. I can afford to step in, I said carefully, because I've spent years planning my life as if no one would ever catch me if I fell. My mom's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know you felt like that. I met her gaze. You did. You just didn't think it mattered. The room fell quiet again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was discomfort. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it onto the table between us. This is what I'm willing to do, I said. And this is how. My dad opened it first. His eyebrows knit together as he read. My mom leaned over his shoulder. My sister craned her neck, her face draining of color. This is a loan, my dad said flatly. Yes, I replied. With clear terms. Why are there conditions? My sister asked, her voice sharp. Because this isn't an emergency donation, I said. It's structured help. My mom's voice trembled. You don't trust us. I trust patterns, I said quietly. And this pattern has been in place my entire life. No one argued with that. The conditions weren't cruel. They weren't dramatic. They were practical. Assets had to be listed and sold before any money changed hands. Spending had to be documented instead of guessed at. No new financial commitments without proof of sustainability. Family therapy, not suggested, but required. And a written agreement that my name, my credit, and my future would never again be assumed as backup. My dad pushed the folder away from him, jaw tight. This is cold, he said. This is how banks treat people. I nodded once. Then treat me like a bank. Because when you needed emotional support, I was family. When you needed money, I was infrastructure. My sister's eyes filled with tears. So you're punishing us now? I shook my head. I'm stopping the punishment of me. She looked at our parents, then back at me, panic creeping into her voice. If you don't help us, we lose everything. I held her gaze. If I help without boundaries, I lose everything I've built. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My mom reached for my hand, then hesitated, her fingers hovering like she wasn't sure she still had the right. We never meant to make you feel last, she said softly. I gently pulled my hand back. But you did. And you said it out loud. No one argued with that. My dad stared at the paperwork like it might change if you looked long enough. So this is it, he said. Sign or sink. No, I corrected him. This is grow or repeat. Time stretched. My parents whispered to each other in low, frantic tones. My sister wiped at her cheeks, her husband pacing behind her like a man waiting outside an operating room. For the first time in my life, I wasn't filling the silence. I wasn't offering solutions. I wasn't softening edges. I waited. Finally, my dad looked up. We need time. I nodded. You have 24 hours. My sister's head snapped up. That's it? That's it, I said, standing. Tomorrow, I'll come back. Either we move forward with this, or we don't move forward at all. As I walked toward the door, my mom called my name, her voice breaking. If we say no, she asked, are you walking away? I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I'm not walking away from you, I said. I'm walking toward myself. The next day, when I returned, the papers were signed. No speeches. No excuses dressed as apologies. Just shaky signatures and tired faces. The relief in the room was real, but so was the loss. Something had shifted permanently. As I gathered my things, my sister looked at me differently than she ever had before. Not with superiority. Not with expectation. With uncertainty. And for the first time, that wasn't my problem to fix. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, in steps so small they were almost easy to miss. The first changes were practical. Assets were listed. Subscriptions were canceled. Expenses were tracked instead of ignored. Numbers stopped being abstract and started becoming limits. My parents downsized their expectations before they downsized anything else. And that alone changed the tone of every conversation. Family therapy began a few weeks later. Awkward at first. Defensive. My dad spoke carefully, like every sentence might be used against him. My mom cried more than she talked. My sister sat stiffly, arms crossed, as if accountability were a language she'd never learned. I listened more than I spoke. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I no longer needed to convince anyone of my reality. The truth was already written down, signed, and agreed to. Something unexpected happened over time. The panic faded. The urgency softened. Without me quietly absorbing the consequences, everyone else had to carry their share. My sister learned how to sit with discomfort instead of handing it off. My parents stopped using phrases like "we'll figure it out" when they really meant "I will." The relationship didn't heal in a dramatic way. There were no movie moments. No sudden transformations. No emotional speeches tied up with apologies. But there was space. Space where guilt used to live. Space where obligation once pressed down on my chest. Back in Seattle, my life felt lighter. I focused on my work. I slept better. I stopped bracing myself every time my phone buzzed. When my mom called, it was to ask how I was, not what I could do. When my sister texted, it wasn't followed by a request. The biggest change wasn't theirs. It was mine. I stopped feeling responsible for maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. I stopped proving my worth by fixing problems that weren't mine. I learned something simple and difficult at the same time. Boundaries don't erase love. They define where love can exist without destroying you. One evening, sitting alone in my apartment, I realized I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I had already chosen myself. For a long time, I thought being last in my family meant I needed to try harder. Give more. Stay quieter. I was wrong. Being last wasn't a position to fight for. It was a signal. A signal to step out of the line entirely and build a life where my value didn't depend on sacrifice. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know something. You're not alone. And you're not selfish for wanting a life that doesn't require you to disappear to keep everyone else comfortable. If stories like this help you breathe a little easier, stay with me. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop being the one who saves everyone else.